It's July 3rd, 2016, and it's 9:30 in the morning on a beautiful summer day. A young boy lives in the South Park neighborhood of Houston, Texas. He sees a man sleeping. For some unknown reason, it scares him. He goes and gets his father.
Hey, you need some help?
He says, "Hey, wake up." The person doesn't move. Now the dad becomes alarmed, and he calls 911. EMTs arrive. They discover it's a woman, perhaps early 30s. This is an awful scene. It's 4th of July weekend, and everyone else in Houston is getting ready for fireworks and picnics, except for the police. They have a body on their hands. I spent my career closing murder cases, but I'm not the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare breed to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to find justice for the dead. That's what it takes to be an American detective.
My name is Brian Harris. I'm a retired detective sergeant from the Houston Police Department Homicide Division. I worked in the Homicide Division for almost 22 years.
"22 pounds of heroin was seized along with a small amount of cocaine, marijuana, and hashish."
It was a Sunday morning.
25 people.
I'm sipping my first sips of coffee,
Face charges when...
and sure enough, cell phone went off, and I knew it.
This is Harris.
Patrol had informed our homicide desk that there was a dead body across from Jones High School, located in southeast Houston. Mike was at the scene upon my arrival.
My name is Michael Perez. I've been with the Homicide Division for about 3 months. This would be my first scene as a lead investigator.
Mike didn't have a partner assigned to him, so I volunteered until we could get Mike a permanent partner.
Brian Harris had a reputation as being a good investigator. I knew that if I asked a question and I thought was dumb, he wouldn't think it was a dumb question.
Morning, Detective. Morning. So what do we got? So far, not much.
Perez explains this is a woman. He's guessing late 20s. There is no identification, so he has no idea who she is. He believes she has multiple gunshot wounds to the head, but it's very difficult to tell because of the hair and the blood and the mess.
Mike and I then started looking at the crime scene itself. How does that body get there? We noticed that there's what we call transfer blood. The blood evidence told us that a vehicle stopped and a body was dragged out of the vehicle. And then her body is dumped as if it was just a piece of garbage.
All right, let's go ahead and get her up here.
The body is pulled out on the side of the road. Once we were able to get a closer look at the victim, it was clear. This was a gunshot wound to the back of the head or to the front of the head.
Is it one gunshot wound? Is it two? Is it five? Body has been cleaned.
I noticed that the victim had all her jewelry on her. If it was a robbery, why would she still have her jewelry on her?
There's got to be a story here. Perhaps this is a sexual assault, or is this a domestic violence type situation?
So the information in hand is extremely limited. Who is this person? How did she come to be here? And Is there any way we can identify this person?
The murder scene's right across the street from a high school. So we were just hoping those cameras had a wide enough angle that it would have caught the dumping of our victim's body.
Is that surveillance equipment only on during school hours? Where is it pointed? Well, we want to see that video footage. And if there's nothing to it, well, then there's nothing to it. But there could be something.
Turns out they quickly were able to burn a copy, and we were able to see the video footage. You see two headlights. And sure enough, right at the spot of where the body is dumped, a vehicle stops. You see some kind of movement going around towards the passenger side of the vehicle, which would be consistent where our transfer blood is. And then you see what looks like somebody dragging something big from the passenger side. There seems to be some kind of movement towards the ditch. And then the vehicle takes off again. It's all making sense. This crime scene's talking to us.
The next day, of course, is the 4th of July. Everyone's getting ready for hamburgers, hot dogs, and beer. But Harris and Perez have a job to do. They're going to go to an autopsy, not a picnic.
Good morning, Doc.
The autopsies and wounds tell a story, just like a crime scene tells a story.
It's close contact wound.
So we're looking to see if it's a clean wound, and it's not. You have what's called stippling. That explosion goes into the skin, so it almost looks like burned particles all around the wound. And if the gun is a close impact wound, it will literally brand your skin, and you can't wipe it away.
No signs of projectile.
Any kind of ballistics evidence that was left inside the skull, like say a fired bullet, it would have been really helpful, but we didn't know what kind of weapon we're looking for.
Have you guys got any idea yet?
Not yet. We need to run the prints.
Well, in the state of Texas, they take a fingerprint from you when you get a driver's license. So if this person has a driver's license, there should be a record of her fingerprints.
On July 5th, we get the hit on the fingerprints, and events really started to roll very quickly as far as us being able to determine who our victim was.
The victim is a 31-year-old female named Kumba Sise. Now, who decided that Kumba needs to go away? Somebody certainly did.
One of the first steps is to interview family members, and that was going to be Mike's job.
Michael Perez is about to make his first death notification to a family. There's not many things uglier than that in that line of work, particularly when you arrive at the door wearing a suit, holding up a badge to identify yourself as the police.
Being the first actual victim's family that I'm going to actually talk to you, of course, I was nervous.
Before you say a word, the person that opens that door knows why you're here and knows what you're going to say, because someone is not home who's supposed to be home.
Mr. Cisse?
You see it in their face. I saw it there every time. They know this is the moment they've dreaded all their lives.
Thank you.
Miss Cisse, she was in shock. She was not really wanting to believe what happened. I asked for some background on her daughter. She told me that she was, a good kid growing up. She had lots of friends.
I am a friend/sister to Kumba. It was real close. She was a sweet person. She didn't like seeing people down. Didn't have a bad bone in her body. She had great energy, good vibes, and she was on her way to being something. She was good to me.
Her parents are immigrants from Sierra Leone in Central Africa, but Kumba was born in the United States. She's going places at her young age and has done very well for herself.
Kumba was a mover. She was a shaker, and she was on her path to success. She was modeling, and she had a model career. But she wasn't just satisfied to rest her laurels on being a model.
She was working as the host of an internet radio show, and she would interview people on controversial topics and also present independent hip-hop artists to the community. She had ambition. She had dreams. Kumba Cisse seemed to have it going on.
She was going to use that platform to get to where she needed to be.
It's pretty obvious that Kumba is a together person. She paints a very different picture than you often see among homicide victims who live a dangerous lifestyle. Kumba does not do that.
When was the last time you heard from your daughter?
She was here on Saturday.
Saturday?
Kumba's mother, she had said that Saturday morning at about 11, Kumba showed up.
Hey, Ma! Baby!
And was talking about going to a party. It was supposed to be later on that evening, and then Kumba left.
Perez asked the family, was there anyone that Kumba was having problems with?
As Mike is hearing information from family members, there are a couple of possibilities as far as potential suspects. One being a former boyfriend in which they had a rocky relationship and he was very bitter.
His name is David Gabriel, and apparently his relationship with Kumba went south over money.
Give me the money. I don't owe you nothing. Leave me alone.
Money can be a very powerful motive. Money drives people. All sorts of things come back to money as a very strong motive in violent crime. Is that what happened with Mr. Gabriel? I think we better find out. But before Perez leaves, Kumba's family provides a final critical piece of information.
What about her car? You guys found it yet?
No, we weren't aware. Can you describe it?
Her brother did say that Kumba had a vehicle, a blue Volkswagen Beetle. So now we have a vehicle missing.
Now Perez has something he can pursue. Here we have a woman shot to death with a single gunshot wound, and the car has been stolen, perhaps, by the person who shot her.
The only thing the video could confirm was that we were dealing with a small, perhaps bubble-shaped type vehicle, the way it was designed, dark in color, but our instinct was telling us, is this a Beetle?
Where is that car? Who has it now? Did he kill for it? Well, we're about to see it. Now, on the 6th of July...
Hey, it's Sergeant Harris. Got a bolo for you.
Harris and Perez put out a bolo to be on the lookout for this car.
2004 Volkswagen Beetle, blue in color.
But before the hit comes back on the car, Perez wants to talk to a bitter ex-boyfriend of Kumba, whose name is David Gabriel.
Kumba did have an abusive boyfriend, but they broke up. Apparently, Kumba had owed some money.
Well, now, come on down, my friend. You are the next contestant on The Murder is Right.
I hear that you and Kumba parted on bad terms.
He says, I'm sure you're aware that Kumba's been murdered, and it's my understanding that you had a dispute with her over money.
That's just a misunderstanding, boy.
He says Kumba had her own money, she had her own job, and she would take care of herself.
Gabriel says the issue was moot. Well, anybody could say that, so we're going to need some other information, Mr. Gabriel. Where were you on the night this murder occurred?
I was outside of town at a house party.
Can anybody verify that?
Yeah.
Gabriel was in front of a couple of dozen witnesses. Perez checks out the alibi, and they all independently confirm that David Gabriel was present all evening at this party.
Appreciate you.
So Gabriel is out. Homicide investigation is a series of challenges, and initially it's often more bad news than good. You cannot lose your resolve. You have to play the game. You often hear people say, well, I'll just have to wait for a break. No, you don't wait for anything. You make your own breaks. You make your own luck. In the case of this Volkswagen, this car is involved in a homicide. And it doesn't take very long for somebody to say, hey, we have that car.
Lo and behold, by Texas Southern University, there's a report of a vehicle fire.
This car is found across the street from a Texas Southern University dormitory building, a burned out blue Volkswagen Bug. Well, who's responsible for this mess?
The arson investigators run the vehicle identification number. They see that it's linked to our homicide report and the death of Kumba.
So they go to the vehicle examination building.
I'm Detective Perez. This is Sergeant Harris.
This is her car. This eliminates a carjacking. Why steal a car at gunpoint and then set it on fire?
You know, it's not as burned up in the back as you might think.
People forget this. Fire needs oxygen. And when you roll up all the windows and then you set the car on fire, did some serious damage, but it's not going to last very long.
It's a panic attempt at the destruction of evidence. You're going to try to burn a car with a gallon of gasoline with the windows rolled up? You're not exactly the brightest bulb in the fixture, and you don't have much of a plan. It's not a carjacking. It's none of those things. It's somebody she knows, someone she's connected to. That's who killed her. They examine this car, and they discover blood on the inside of the driver's door.
We requested swabs of DNA be taken.
All right, thank you for your time.
All right.
And we're hoping upon hope that at Texas Southern University, perhaps that there's video.
So I drove to check the area out where the vehicle was burned. And I was able to have their surveillance pulled so we can view that video.
When they review that surveillance footage, someone abandons that Volkswagen Beetle car at 2:07 a.m. on the 4th of July. And in the footage, returns a day later on the 5th of July in the company of someone driving a Buick LeSabre.
You see the outline. Clearly, it's the Volkswagen Bug. And then a figure starts rummaging around in that vehicle. The next thing you see is a big flash, a big burst. And then as they're literally running away, and the vehicle is in flames. Who brought that person to that scene? Somebody's helping this killer cover their tracks.
Now we have not one, but two mystery players.
While I was doing the research on the vehicle, I received a phone call from a man named Carlton Turney. He said that he's a concert promoter. He has an ID that was found.
This individual had called up Perez and said he'd been following the story on the news.
He was putting on a party, and he rented out a warehouse in the southeast side of town, further east of where the body was found. The party was Saturday, July 2nd, the night of the murder. He said it ended about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. Later on that evening, he got a phone call from this guy who owns the warehouse. One of your people from your party dropped their ID. So this probably belongs to one of them.
He hands the ID card to Perez and Harris, and it's the ID card of Kumba Sise.
I noticed there was some blood on the bottom corner of the ID card.
Not only is it her ID, it is smeared with blood. For now, you have a working theory that Kumba was at this party late on Saturday night, so the likelihood is great that the shooting occurs in the parking lot. The problem is the identity of the person behind this is still a mystery. Who are they, and why do they want this young woman dead? Now, Harris and Perez are convinced that someone Kumba knew killed her. So they're going to focus on who knows her well. They begin by going to the internet radio station Style Radio and speaking to the general manager, a Donald Hilliard.
I want to talk to you about one of your hosts, Kumba Sise.
Yeah, Kumba. That was my girl.
Kumba was well regarded by her boss at that station, Don Hilliard. And Don Hilliard thought this woman was going to have a national following one day.
You are listening to Houston's leading internet radio show.
She had it. She had it. She had that radio voice. She had that personality.
She really was the real deal.
Mr. Hilliard explains that Kumba has a boyfriend that on occasion was a co-host with her.
Don revealed crucial information about Kumba's current boyfriend.
His name was Leroy Stutz. Now, this is the first time Harris and Perez have heard that name.
We would have good shows, you know.
Kumba, recently she'd been allowing Leroy Stutz to partake in the radio broadcast.
Do you believe in generational curses? And if so,
They discussed music, lifestyle. She was always a go-getter. She was going to make sure she did what she needed to do to get where she wanted to be. And that made him jealous. He didn't like it.
The police learned that Kumba had invited another woman to co-host one of the programs.
Yeah, Dre just has to go. I keep telling you, Drake loves waffle fries. Does he?
And when Stutz found out about this, he went wild.
I mean, tell me to calm down. This is not her show.
He went into a rage.
Leroy seemed extremely irritated that Kumba was more popular. And Leroy, he didn't generate the same popularity that Kumba did.
Is that a motive for murder? Not having enough fans? Who knows what comprises a motive? People have a reason to kill. It often can be a completely insane reason, but it's a reason.
And then the event that set everything off, and that was the end of Leroy's radio career.
I think we as women need to take the time to empower men more.
Y'all complain about this, you complain about that. Women, all the same. All of you. So maybe when you up here giving advice?
Leroy went on a rant, using the most degrading terms.
Yeah, you sit there on that mic saying this.
Don said, I had to let him go. I couldn't have this kind of personality on the air and jeopardize everything that Kumba and himself had built up.
So what is it that you're upset about, Leroy? Is it the fan thing, or is it something else? Let's find out exactly who you are, Leroy, and see what you've been up to in your life. So Perez and Harris pulled a record in criminal history of one Leroy Stutz.
Hey, Mike, come check this out.
And they are floored by what they find.
In 1992, he committed a murder and was convicted in that case and received a sentence of 45 years in prison and served almost 18 years of that sentence.
A 45-year sentence for murder, or for some unknown reason, the parole board releases him. Well, Leroy, you seem like a charming fellow. So, Kumba, what are you doing with this thug? That's the question. There are young women, unfortunately, who are attracted to the bad boys, the wild and free type. The trouble with bad boys is they do bad things.
We don't have enough to get a warrant on this guy to even bring him in and talk to him. Right now, everything is just circumstantial.
Harris and Perez would like to assemble an affidavit in support of an arrest warrant for Leroy Stutz, but they don't have it. And they know they don't. That's the worst position to be in. So what do? You keep looking. You keep moving forward. The surveillance tapes show the Buick LeSabre. Harris does a registration check on Buick LeSabres that might be associated with the Stutes family, and it turns out Leroy's daughter Latrice is a registered owner of a Buick LeSabre.
We didn't know how we were going to proceed with this. Was Latrice at the scene?
Things have gotten even more interesting.
Shortly after this point, my phone rings and I get a call. And there's a man on the line named Daryl.
Okay.
And he sounds very panicked. Daryl identifies himself as Leroy's cousin. What Daryl said was that very late on July 2nd, he was over at his sister's house, Rhonda's, which is also in Southeast Houston. Next thing, Leroy shows up.
Just listen to me, all right? Because we ain't got time.
Leroy had scratches on his face, and Leroy needs a change of clothes, and he's panicked.
Leroy Stutes has blood on his clothes, and Darrell doesn't like any part of this.
All right, chill. And so Daryl was able to provide Leroy with a new set of clothes, new shoes, but he left a pair of boots.
Well, we'll be right over to see you.
Come on, quick. I don't want nobody seeing.
And you got to keep in mind, there is a intelligence network in the underground who's saying what about whom and who is disloyal to others. They're not interested in helping the police. They're interested in helping the victim.
There's a pair of brown polo boots,
Yeah, it looks like blood.
and I noticed there's blood on the boots.
So a remarkable find in terms of evidence to be examined by forensics.
I'll get these over to the property room and have them swab for blood.
In the meantime, I'm going to see what I can find out about the daughter.
What can she tell us about what dear old dad has been up to? Detective Perez now must run forensic tests on a pair of boots that belong to our primary suspect, Leroy Stutes.
Yep, that's positive ID for blood.
With that information, I call Harris back. I said, hey, look, it's blood. He says, all right, I'm going to call the DA.
Harris issues arrest warrants for Leroy Stutes for first-degree murder. But where is he now? Harris wants to talk to Leroy's daughter, Latrice.
The kind of car that Latrice drives, a Buick, is very similar to the car that we see on the video.
What do you have to say about that, Latrice? Harris is an expert interrogator, but Perez has to learn, so he's going to allow Perez to do this. He will oversee it, but Perez will do the questioning.
It's an opportunity to now establish relationships in that interview room and try to get information that is crucial to the case.
Let's talk about your father.
Information that is crucial to the case.
Let's talk about your father.
When I was talking to Latrice during the interview, I asked her if she was really close to her dad. She said, no, not at all.
I know what I think, but I want to know
I
what
said,
you think.
he's been away for a long time. Have you tried to get close?
Not really.
So then I asked her, well, do you think he's capable of hurting somebody?
Well, I mean,
She says, well, yeah, he can hurt somebody. I said, well, do you think he may have hurt Kumba? He said, well, they have arguments, but what they do behind closed doors is what they do behind closed doors. So she left it at that. So I bring up the Volkswagen.
he asked me to take him to go.
She says, well, my dad asked me to take him over there. She said he got out of the car and went to the Beetle and then came back to the car and we left. I said, you didn't see him burn the car or anything like that? She's like, no, I didn't see any of that.
She doesn't reveal that she sees him set it on fire, but it's pretty darn good statement. And hats off to Mike to getting somebody who is very hostile, inadvertently, without her even knowing, reveal very damaging information about her father. I think of that old show, Kung Fu, where they have the pebble in the hand, and before you become the master, you got to grab that pebble. Clearly, Mike was ready now to grab that pebble from my hand.
Latrice is evasive and uncooperative, but she finally puts Leroy Stutz in the middle of that VW 1 or 2 moments before it begins to burn. So they actually got from her what they wanted. Therein lies the art of interrogation. Given that information and the footage, Latrice Stutz could be an accessory after the fact to that crime, and she's placed in custody. But our suspect, Leroy Stutz, is still in the wind. In the meantime, Harris and Perez need to start building their case, starting with the motive. What made him kill her? Because right now you don't know. You're convinced you know it's him, and you're probably right about that, but why did he do it? So Harris discovers Latasha White. Kumba and her, they were very good friends, and Harris always wondered why Kumba would associate with a criminal like Leroy Stutz. Latasha White provides an answer to that question in the fact that Leroy Stutz lied to her.
Originally, he told us the reason he went to jail was because he had did a robbery. He did not tell us that he murdered somebody.
Leroy Stutz lied to Kumba, said he'd been in prison, but it was for robbery, and he took the fall for an associate and good friend.
Kumba tells her friend, Leroy's not the guy that I thought he was.
Like, I gotta find a way out from under this dude. For real, for real.
The man told so many lies he couldn't keep up with him.
Kumba, she knew Leroy had been to prison, but in the last few days, she finds out it's not robbery or burglary, it's murder. Well, that's pretty powerful.
Like, and then I keep hearing about all the stuff that happened in jail with him.
Kumba told me, I think he gay. And I was like, what you mean? And she was like, I heard something, I think he gay.
There were rumors about Kumba confronting Stutz about his sexual history in prison.
So you begin to unravel the onion. You pull away one layer after another. Who are you, Leroy? And what pushed your buttons to the point where your girlfriend wound up dead?
We also believe that Leroy's pretty pissed. He didn't like the idea that Kumba was telling people he was sleeping with men. And so he was angry. This was a time bomb ready to explode.
When criminals flee, they go to predictable places. Sometimes they go where their money is, their mama is, or sometimes their main squeeze, who might hide them or help them because no one else will. And true to form,
So, I've just got a couple of pairs that I want to get.
after a week of searching,
Show me your hands. Back up towards me.
our man Leroy Stutz is seen stepping out of his mother's car at a commercial business.
Leroy Stutz, you are under arrest for the murder of Kumba Cisse.
And he's arrested without incident for first-degree murder.
Go ahead, sit over there.
Hi, hey, Leroy. I'm Brian. This is Mike. You did something really, really bad, and you know that I've been doing this game a long time, so I'm not going to waste your time.
Tell me to the wrong person about you, Kumba.
Well, my, Leroy. Had to go see Mom. Now it's your turn to go see a judge.
Leroy, I do believe that you're responsible for Kumba's death. What happened on that weekend of July 4th weekend?
I get those scratches on your face. Me and my sister was coming in the house in the dark, and I failed to get my face on the stool.
Harris is an expert interrogator, but in the case of Mr. Stutz, Harris identifies him as a sociopath, that he has no emotion. So he decides the best thing to do with him is to go directly at him, to lay out the case that he has against him. And he does so bit by bit.
I want to share some things with you. We have your boots with the blood on them. How do we explain that? That your DNA is on Kumba's pants and clothing. But let's look at what we have here. We have her car that we found. We have somebody that loves you that admits that they took you to that car. We have your boots. All right? We got video. Okay? What else do we have here? Took a while. We have DNA evidence. We have the vehicle, the video, the clothing, the boots. And I think that kind of sank with him. We had too many people. His own daughter who placed him by that car. We had enough for Leroy Stutes. And look where it leads us. Right to you. Okay? Now, we're here talking to you because you're the only one that killed her.
I think y'all really know I didn't do this.
Stutes just sits there and looks at him and denies all of it. I didn't do those things. You have to remember that Leroy thinks he's a genius. He thinks he's very clever, and he's covered up all his tracks. He thinks he's smarter than anybody in the room, and he's not as smart as the chair he's sitting in.
We believe that in the end, the following events took place. It's after 11 o'clock on July 2nd. Kumba meets up with Leroy, and she's at this warehouse, a public place where she can have this breakup.
Will you stop?
Coming over here thinking we're gonna break up.
And she's breaking up with Stutes. She leaves, and I think it's right then and there. She has the argument, and it continues out into the parking lot.
I said, yo, hold up.
No, go home. Stop and give me my purse. Quit playing with me.
And I think Stutes grabs her purse, grabs her.
Hey, we ain't done. We ain't done till I say we
We
done.
are done. Go home.
Like that now? Now you're gonna get...
No,
now you...
stop.
Hey, I'm serious getting this
Leroy,
ball.
stop.
Now.
And he pulls out a pistol.
Leroy, stop.
Now, they have a physical fight.
Lord.
Leroy, stop.
See, James,
Why do we know this? Because Stutes in the interview room has scratches above his eye.
what I say is, get it fine.
Her lanyard somehow falls out.
Get it fine.
And I think he makes her get into the car.
Leroy, please.
It's too late.
He's holding her at gunpoint. It hits her on the left back side. He stole from the world everything that Kumba could bring to it. It's Kumba who could have done so much with her life.
You get emotional when you kill. You don't think straight. You make 100 mistakes, maybe even 1,000 mistakes. You're going to drag a body in a residential neighborhood. Nobody's ever going to see this person when the sun comes up. Doesn't make any sense, but that's what he does.
And he gets back in the car and he drives over to Rhonda's house. He asks Daryl for a change of clothes, but he messes up. He leaves his polo boots behind. And then at some point in time, he goes to TSU and he drops off the car. Later on, he contacts his daughter. He wants a ride. And she admits that she's at the TSU campus, puts him with the vehicle. And the only thing she doesn't admit to is seeing him actually set it on fire. The car gets torched.
Leroy Stutes goes to trial, pleads not guilty, because, of course, in his mind, he isn't guilty. Someone insulted him. You don't do that. Not to him. When the trial is over, the jury finds him guilty unanimously, and he is sentenced to life without parole in the Texas State Penitentiary system, where he remains to this day.
A killer, a murderer, a monster. That's what he is. A monster. I just want to say something to Leroy. I hope he rot in hell. I hope that they don't give him the death penalty. I want him to live with what he has done for the rest of his life and die knowing what he did.
This case really is like so many other domestic violence when the woman finally decides, this is it, I've had enough, I'm going to move on. That's also the most dangerous time. And at least for Kumba, it was the deadliest time.
If that parole board would have never let that man out, Kumba would probably be on 97.9 right now. When he took her, he took a lot from a lot of people. He took away a sweet person. Like, this girl would, oh my God.
Harris and Perez did not get a confession in this case. Hardly anyone ever does. That's not the point. The point is they conduct a thorough professional investigation resulting in the arrest and conviction of a person responsible for a killing. What a piece of work. The sociopath in action, and results in the tragic loss of a 31-year-old girl who just wanted to live her life and found precisely the wrong person to play with.
The Silence on the 4th, based on true events, prologue, The Sleeper. July 3rd, 2016, South Park, Houston, Texas, 9:30 a.m. The heat in Houston doesn't just rise, it presses down. It is a physical weight, a wet wool blanket thrown over the city before the sun has even cleared the pine tops. By mid-morning, on the day before Independence Day, the air in the South Park neighborhood was already shimmering, distorting the asphalt into liquid mirages. 10-year-old Malik pushed his bike along the sidewalk, the rubber tires humming softly against the concrete. The neighborhood was quiet, caught in that lazy Sunday suspension between church services and the early preparation for the next day's barbecues. The smell of charcoal starter fluid and cut grass hung faintly in the stagnant air. Malik stopped. Across the street, near the perimeter of Jones High School, something broke the uniformity of the manicured ditch. The grass there was tall, fed by the heavy rains of June, a lush, chaotic green that usually hid the discarded soda cans and fast food wrappers. But this was different. There was a shape. To a child's eye, context is everything. A shape on the ground is a pile of laundry, a discarded mannequin, a sleeping drunk. Malik squinted, shading his eyes against the glare. It looked like a person. A woman, maybe? She was lying face down, her limbs arranged in a careless sprawl that suggested deep, exhausted sleep. "Hey!" Malik called out, his voice thin in the heavy air. The figure didn't move. A cold prickle of unease, entirely at odds with the sweating heat of the morning, danced down Malik's spine. He dropped his bike, the metal clattering loudly, and ran back toward his house. "Dad!" he screamed, bursting through the screen door. "Dad, come quick! There's a lady sleeping in the ditch and she won't wake up." 10 minutes later, the wail of sirens cut through the humidity, shattering the Sunday peace. The neighbors emerged from their porches, arms crossed, faces tight with a grim familiarity. In South Park, sirens were not uncommon, but the pitch of these was different, urgent, final. The first patrol officer on the scene, a young rookie named Evans, stepped out of his cruiser. He approached the ditch cautiously, his hand resting instinctively on his belt. He saw the woman. He saw the blood matting the back of her hair, stiff and black in the sun. He saw the unnatural angle of her neck. He reached for his radio, his throat dry. "Dispatch," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "We have a 11 to 44 here. Deceased person. Start homicide." Chapter 1. The Old Guard and the New. Detective Sergeant Brian Harris stared at the bottom of his coffee cup as if the secrets of the universe were swirling in the dregs. It was Sunday, the Lord's Day, a day for rest, for family, for mentally preparing for the chaos that the 4th of July always brought to Houston. The phone rang. Harris didn't jump, he didn't sigh. He simply set the cup down on the granite countertop with a deliberate click and picked up the receiver. He knew the ringtone. It was the specific tone he had assigned to the homicide desk. "Harris," he said. His voice was gravel and smoke, the voice of a man who had spent 22 years speaking for the dead. "Sarge, we got a body," the desk sergeant said. "South Park, across from Jones High. Patrol says it looks like a dump job. Address? Documentation says the intersection of Streetlow and Southwind. Female. No ID visible." "I'm rolling." Harris hung up. He moved with the economy of motion that comes from decades of routine. Badge, gun, keys, sunglasses. He walked out into the blinding Texas sun, the blast of heat hitting him like a physical blow. He loved this city, but God, sometimes he hated the weather. The drive to South Park was a blur of highway concrete and heat shimmer. Harris let his mind drift, categorizing the possibilities. Female victim, dumped, Sunday morning. It smelled of a Saturday night gone wrong. A domestic dispute that escalated? A robbery? A drug deal? When he arrived at the scene, the yellow tape was already fluttering in the hot breeze. A small crowd had gathered, held back by 2 patrol officers who looked like they were melting in their uniforms. Harris ducked under the tape and saw him. Michael Perez, the kid. Perez had been with homicide for 3 months. He was sharp, eager, and possessed a hairline that Harris hadn't seen in the mirror since the Clinton administration. Perez was standing near the body, taking notes in a small spiral notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Morning, detective," Harris said, coming up beside him. Perez jumped slightly, then straightened. "Morning, Sarge. I didn't hear you walk up." "That's because I'm a ghost, Mike. You've been here long enough to know ghosts don't make noise." Harris gestured to the body. "What do we have?" Perez took a breath, composing his report. "Female. African American. I'm guessing late 20s, maybe early 30s. No purse, no wallet. She's got multiple gunshot wounds to the head. It's a mess, Sarge. Hard to tell how many entry points with the hair and the blood." Harris nodded, stepping closer but being careful where he placed his feet. He looked at the woman. She was dressed well, stylish jeans, a nice top. She didn't look like a transient. She didn't look like a prostitute. She looked like someone who had plans. "Jewelry?" Harris asked. "Yes, sir. Rings, a necklace. Looks like gold." "So, not a robbery," Harris muttered. "Or a very bad one." He crouched down, his knees popping audibly. He scanned the ground around the body. The grass was flattened in a distinct trail leading from the asphalt of the road to the ditch. "Drag marks," Harris pointed out. "See that transfer blood? Someone killed her elsewhere, drove her here, and dragged her out. Treated her like a bag of mulch." Perez nodded grimly. "Patrol said a kid found her. Thought she was sleeping." "They always do," Harris said softly. "Until they don't." He stood up and looked around. Jones High School loomed across the street, a sprawling brick fortress. "Cameras," Harris said. "It's a high school, Perez. In 2016, they have cameras. If we're lucky, they point at the street. If we're really lucky, they were recording on a holiday weekend." Perez's eyes lit up. "I'll get on it. I'll find the custodian or whoever has the keys." "You do that. This is your lead, Mike." Perez paused. "My lead? But I don't have a partner assigned yet." Harris adjusted his sunglasses. "Well, today you do. I'm volunteering. Don't make me regret it." Perez grinned, a flash of white teeth in the gloom of the crime scene. "I won't, Sarge." As Perez jogged off toward the school, Harris turned back to the woman in the grass. The flies were starting to gather. "Who are you?" he whispered to the silence. "And who wanted you quiet so badly?" Chapter 2. The Ghost in the Machine. The surveillance room at Jones High School smelled of floor wax and stale air conditioning. The assistant principal, a man who clearly didn't appreciate being called in on a Sunday, typed in a password with aggressive stabs of his finger. "System loops every 48 hours, the man grunted. "If it happened Friday, you're out of luck." "We believe it was last night or early this morning," Perez said, leaning over the man's shoulder. "Can you check the camera facing Streetlow Street?" The screen flickered, populated by a grid of grayscale views. Empty hallways, an empty cafeteria, and then the street. "Timestamp," Harris commanded. "Go to 2 a.m. and scan forward." They watched the grainy footage. Cars passed occasionally, streaks of light in the darkness. A stray dog trotted across the frame. "Stop," Harris said. "Rewind. 2:23 a.m. On the screen, a pair of headlights cut through the darkness. A car slowed down, creeping along the curb. It wasn't a sedan. It had a distinctive, rounded shape. "Is that a Beetle?" Perez asked, squinting. "Looks like it," Harris said. "Volkswagen 2000s model." "Watch." The car stopped directly in front of the spot where the body was found. The headlights cut off, plunging the car into shadow, but the silhouette remained. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the passenger door opened. A figure emerged. It was hard to make out details: male, female, tall, short. It was just a shadow moving in the grain. The figure moved to the passenger side. There was a struggle with dead weight. There, Harris pointed. He's dragging her. The shadow hauled a larger, limp shape out of the car. It was clumsy, brutal work. The figure dragged the body toward the ditch, disappeared for 30 seconds, and then ran back to the car. The headlights flashed back on. The Beetle made a U-turn and sped away. "We got the car," Perez said, his voice tight. "A VW Beetle. That's distinct." "It's a start," Harris said, "but a car isn't a name. We need to identify the victim. Until she has a name, she's just a Jane Doe. And Jane Doe doesn't have enemies. Jane Doe doesn't have ex-boyfriends. Jane Doe is a mystery." Harris turned to Perez. "We go to the morgue tomorrow. We print her. We find out who she was." Chapter 3. The Unveiling. July 4th, 2016. Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences. While the rest of Houston was buying charcoal and marinating ribs, Harris and Perez were standing in a room that smelled of antiseptic and cold steel. The medical examiner, Dr. Lee, peeled back the sheet. "Gunshot wound to the head," Lee said, pointing to a small, dark hole near the temple. "Close range. You see the stippling? The powder burns?" Harris leaned in. "Contact wound?" "Near contact, within an inch. Whoever did this, they were looking her right in the eye or standing right next to her. This wasn't a sniper. This was personal." "Any defensive wounds?" Perez asked. "None. She likely didn't see it coming, or it happened so fast she couldn't react." "We ran her prints," Harris said. "We got a hit." Harris pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Kumba Sese, 31 years old. Local?" "Local enough. Parents are from Sierra Leone, but she's Houston grown." Perez looked at the face on the metal table. It was swollen, distorted by the trauma, but you could still see the structure. High cheekbones, smooth skin. "Kumba," Perez tested the name. "Okay, Kumba. Let's find out who you were." They spent the afternoon digging into the digital life of Kumba Sese. What they found surprised them. She wasn't involved in gangs. She wasn't known to vice. She was a star. "Look at this," Perez said, turning his monitor toward Harris. "She's a model, and she hosts an internet radio show, The Real Talk with Kumba." Harris looked at the photos on the screen. Kumba Sese was stunning, vibrant, smiling, holding a microphone like it was a scepter. She interviewed local artists, discussed community issues, hosted hip-hop showcases. She was ambitious. She was a mover and a shaker. "She was going places," Harris murmured. "She had energy." "Why would someone kill a radio host?" Perez asked. "Jealousy," Harris said. "Love, money, the holy trinity of homicide." "We need to notify the family," Perez said, his shoulders slumping slightly. It was the part of the job every detective dreaded, the knock on the door that ends a family's world. "You ready for this, Mike?" Harris asked. "First notification is primary?" Perez straightened his tie. "I'm ready. Just remember," Harris said, his voice softer now. "Don't use euphemisms. Don't say she's passed or gone. You have to say dead. It's the only way they hear it. It's the only way it becomes real." Chapter 4. The Mother's Tears. The Sese home was a neat, single-story house with a manicured lawn. The American flag hung by the porch, limp in the heat. Perez knocked. The door opened, and an older woman stood there. She looked at Perez, at his suit, at the badge on his belt, and then at Harris, standing a few steps behind. The color drained from her face. "Mrs. Sese?" Perez asked. "No," she whispered. She grabbed the doorframe. "No, no, no. May we come in?" They sat in the living room, surrounded by photos of Kumba. Kumba at graduation. Kumba modeling a dress. Kumba laughing. "Kumba was found yesterday morning," Perez said gently. "She has been killed, ma'am. We are so sorry." The wail that came from Mrs. Sese was primal. It was a sound that tore through the polite fabric of the afternoon. It was the sound of a mother's heart breaking. When the initial storm of grief had subsided into jagged sobs, Harris took the lead. "Mrs. Sese, we need your help to find who did this. We need to know about her life. Who was she seeing? Did she have enemies?" She was a good girl," Mrs. Sese stammered, wiping her eyes with a tissue that was already shredded. She worked hard. She wanted to be famous. She wanted to help people. Was she seeing anyone? There was. A man. David Gabriel. But they broke up. It was bad. He owed her money. Money? Perez wrote the name down. David Gabriel. He was bitter, the mother said. He was angry. But there was someone else recently. I don't know his name. She didn't talk about him much. What about her car? Harris asked. We have video of a Volkswagen Beetle. Mrs. Sese looked up, confused. Yes, that is Kumba's car. A blue Beetle. Is it here? No, ma'am, Harris said. The killer took it. Find her car, she pleaded. Find her car. You find him. As they walked back to their unmarked sedan, Harris lit a cigarette, breaking his own rule about smoking on the job. The ex-boyfriend, Harris said. David Gabriel, angry about money, bitter breakup. Classic motive, Perez agreed. Let's go have a chat with Mr. Gabriel. See if he spent his 4th of July celebrating or cleaning blood out of a Volkswagen. Chapter 5. The Alibi. David Gabriel lived in an apartment complex that had seen better days. When he opened the door, he looked tired, but not panicked. Police? He asked. Is this about Kumba? You heard? News travels fast in the community, detective. I heard she was found. He shook his head. That's messed up. We heard you two had issues, Perez said, leaning against the doorframe. Money issues. Gabriel scoffed. Issues? Yeah, we argued. But I didn't kill her. Kumba was. She was a lot. She was intense. But I didn't hate her. Where were you Saturday night? Harris asked. July 2nd. I was at a party. In Katy. Outside of town. Anyone who can verify that? About 50 people, Gabriel said. I was the DJ. I was on the turntables from 9 p.m. until 3 a.m. I got photos, videos, timestamps. You want to see my Instagram? Harris and Perez exchanged a look. An alibi that tight was rare. Show us, Harris said. Gabriel pulled out his phone. Sure enough, there were videos of him spinning tracks, the crowd cheering, the timestamps clearly visible. 2 a.m., 2:30 a.m., 3 a.m. Unless he could teleport, David Gabriel was not dragging a body into a ditch in South Park at 2:23 a.m. All right, Perez said, disappointment coloring his tone. Thanks for your time. Back in the car, Perez slammed his hand on the steering wheel. Dead end. Not a dead end, Harris corrected. Elimination. Now we know who it wasn't. We clear the board. We focus on the car. The Beetle, Perez said. It's distinctive. It can't just disappear. In Houston? Harris watched the traffic flow by. A car can disappear into a chop shop in an hour. Or the killer panics. He realizes a bright blue Beetle is a rolling billboard for murder. He tries to get rid of it. Chapter 6. Fire and Brimstone. July 6th, 2016. The call came from the arson division. Detective Perez, we got a hit on your VIN. Perez put the phone on speaker. Where? Texas Southern University. Parking lot near the dorms. We got a vehicle fire. Blue Volkswagen Beetle. It's toasted, but the VIN matches Kumba Sese's registration. Harris and Perez drove to the TSU impound lot. The car was a husk. The interior was gutted by fire, the smell of acrid smoke still clinging to the metal. Amateur hour, Harris noted, looking at the windows. They rolled the windows up before lighting it. Why does that matter? Perez asked. Fire needs oxygen, Mike. You close it up, the fire chokes. It gets hot, it melts the dash, but it doesn't incinerate everything. Look. Harris pointed to the driver's side door panel. The plastic was melted, but there were spots that were preserved. Dark, reddish-brown stains. Blood, Perez whispered. Get the techs to swab that, Harris ordered. If that's the killer's blood, we got him. If it's Kumba's, it confirms she was transported in her own car. TSU is a campus, Perez said, looking around. More cameras. Go fishing, Mike. The security footage from TSU was better quality than the high school. It showed the parking lot at 2:07 a.m. on July 4th, a full day after the murder. The Blue Beetle rolled into the lot. It parked. A figure got out. Then, a second car pulled up, a Buick LeSabre, silver. He had an accomplice, Perez said, watching the screen. The figure from the Beetle ran to the Buick, grabbed a red gas can, and ran back. He doused the interior of the Beetle. A flash of light flared on the screen, the ignition. The figure sprinted back to the Buick, jumping into the passenger seat. The Buick sped off, leaving the Beetle smoldering. "We have 2 suspects now," Harris said. "The killer and his ride. Can we get a plate on the Buick?" "Too blurry," Perez squinted. "But we know the make and model, and we know they are comfortable at TSU. Maybe a student, or someone who knows the area." While Perez coordinated with the video team to enhance the footage, Harris's phone rang. "Detective Harris." "Detective, this is Carlton Turney. I'm a promoter. I heard about Kumba." "Yes, Mr. Turney? Look, I threw a party on Saturday night, the night she died. At a warehouse on the southeast side, Kumba was there." Harris sat up straighter. "Go on." "Well, the owner of the warehouse called me today. Said he found an ID card on the floor. It's Kumba's ID, and, Detective, there's blood on it." Chapter 7. The Radio Voice. The warehouse was a cavernous space, smelling of stale beer and dust. The ID card was exactly where Turney said it was, a standard Texas driver's license. Kumba's smiling face, looking up from the concrete. On the corner of the plastic, a smear of dried blood. "She was here," Perez said. "This is the primary scene, or the start of it." They went back to the radio station where Kumba worked. The Edge, an internet station broadcasting from a small studio in a strip mall. The station manager, Don Hilliard, was a large man with a deep, mournful voice. "Kumba was a star," Hilliard said, shaking his head. "She had the gift of gab. People listened to her. We need to know who she was with recently," Harris said. "Her mother mentioned a new boyfriend." Hilliard sighed. "Yeah, Leroy." "Leroy?" "Leroy Stutz. He started hanging around a few months ago. He wanted to be part of the show. He wanted to be a co-host." "Did you let him?" "For a bit. But he didn't have the temperament. He was aggressive. He got into arguments on air. He ranted about women, about how they don't respect men. It was dark stuff. I had to ban him from the mic." "How did he take that?" Perez asked. "Badly. He was jealous of Kumba. She was the star. He was just the boyfriend. He felt small next to her. And a man like Leroy, he doesn't like feeling small." "Do you know anything about his background?" Harris asked. "Kumba told me he'd been in trouble before. Said he did time for a robbery back in the 90 seconds. Harris looked at Perez. "Run him." Back at the station, Perez typed Leroy Stutz into the NCIC database. The screen populated with a mugshot. Perez gasped. "Sarge, you need to see this." Harris walked over. The face on the screen was cold. Hard eyes. A jaw set in permanent defiance. "Leroy Stutz," Perez read. "Convicted in 1992. Murder." "Murder?" Harris raised an eyebrow. "Not robbery. He shot a man. Sentenced to 45 years. He served 18. Paroled in 2010. He lied to her," Harris said. "He told her he was a thief. But he was a killer." Perez scrolled down. "He has a daughter, Latrice Stutz. She's listed as an associate." "Check her vehicles," Harris ordered. Perez typed furiously. "Latrice Stutz, registered owner of a 2005 Buick LeSabre. Silver." Harris smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a predator who had just caught the scent. "Bingo," Harris said. "Daddy kills the girl. Daughter drives the getaway car. It's a family affair." Chapter 8. The Boots. They needed more. Circumstantial evidence was a house of cards. They needed a smoking gun, or in this case, bloody boots. A tip line call came in late that evening. A man named Daryl, sounding terrified. "I know who killed Kumba," Daryl whispered. "It's my cousin, Leroy." "Where is he, Daryl?" Harris asked, pressing the phone to his ear. "I don't know where he is now, but he came to my sister's house that night, Saturday night. He was covered in blood, man. Panicked. He said he got into a fight." "Did he say who with?" "No, he just needed clothes. I gave him some clean clothes. He left his boots. He left them right here on the porch." "Don't touch them," Harris commanded. "We are on our way." The boots were Timberlands, heavy and caked with mud, and on the toe, dark, crusty stains. Perez bagged them. "If this matches Kumba's DNA, it's over," Harris finished. They expedited the DNA testing. While they waited, they brought in Latrice Stutz. Chapter 9. The Interrogation. The interrogation room was a box of gray walls and fluorescent hum. Latrice Stutz sat with her arms crossed, her face a mask of indifference. Harris leaned against the back wall. She's yours, Mike. You take the lead. I'll jump in if she cracks. Perez sat down opposite her. He placed a photo of the burning Volkswagen on the table. We know you were there, Latrice, Perez said softly. We have the video. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, looking away. We have your car, the Buick. We have you picking him up. We know your dad did this. The question is, are you going down for capital murder with him? Or are you a witness? Latrice's eyes flickered. I didn't kill nobody, but you helped him burn the evidence. Harris's voice boomed from the corner, making her jump. That makes you an accessory to murder. In Texas, that can get you a needle in your arm just as quick. He called me, Latrice whispered, her voice trembling. He said he needed a ride. He told me to drive to TSU. He got out. He had a gas can. Did you see him light it? Perez asked. I saw the flash. Then he ran back to the car and told me to drive. He didn't tell me what he did. He just said, he took care of business. He used you, Perez said. He involved his own daughter in a murder cover-up. Latrice put her head in her hands and began to weep. Chapter 10, The Monster. The DNA results came back. The blood on Leroy Stutz's boots was a 100% match for Kumba Sese. A warrant was issued. The manhunt began. They found him a week later, stepping out of his mother's car at a convenience store. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He just looked at Harris with those cold, dead eyes. Leroy Stutz, Harris said, snapping the cuffs on. You're under arrest for the murder of Kumba Sese. In the interview room, Stutz was a stone wall. He sat comfortably, leaning back, treating the detectives like they were annoying flies. I didn't do nothing, Stutz said. Kumba and I were fine. She loved me. She was leaving you, Harris said, leaning across the table. She found out you were a liar. She found out you were a murderer. And she was going to expose you. You got no proof. We got your boots, Leroy, Perez said, slamming the evidence bag on the table, with her blood on them. We got your daughter, who told us everything about the fire. We got the video. We got the DNA from the car door. We have everything. Stutz looked at the boots. For a second, the mask slipped, a flash of fear, quickly replaced by arrogance. I think I want a lawyer, Stutz sneered. Harris stood up. Get a good one. You're going to need it. Epilogue. Radio silence. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty, the foreman read. Leroy Stutz did not flinch. He did not look at Kumba's mother, weeping in the gallery. He simply stared ahead, a void in human shape. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Because of his prior conviction, the system ensured he would never breathe free air again. Outside the courthouse, Harris and Perez stood together. Perez was no longer the rookie. He had the weary set to his shoulders that came with the job. We got him, Perez said. Yeah, Harris replied. He lit a cigarette, watching the smoke curl up into the blue Houston sky. We got him. It doesn't bring her back, Perez said quietly. No, it never does. Justice isn't resurrection, Mike. It's just balance. We balance the scales a little bit. They walked toward their car. Somewhere in the ether of the internet, replays of the Real Talk with Kumba were still streaming. Her voice, vibrant and full of life, continued to speak to a world she had been forced to leave too soon. Do you believe in generational curses? Her voice asked from a passing car's radio, a ghostly echo. And if so, how do we break them? Harris opened the car door. We break them one case at a time, kid. One case at a time. The two detectives got in, and the car merged into the endless flow of Houston traffic, disappearing into the heat of the day. The end. The echo of silence. A Houston homicide. A novel. Based on the investigation of Brian Harris and Michael Perez. Prologue. The weight of the heat. The Houston sun was a physical weight, a humid blanket that smothered the city long before the morning coffee had finished brewing. It was July 3rd, 2016. In the neighborhood of South Park, the air didn't move. It just clung to the skin like a guilty secret. In the 9300 block, near the chain-link fences of Jones High School, the grass was yellowed and parched. A young boy, no older than 10, stepped out of his house, squinting against the glare. To him, the world was supposed to be preparing for the 4th of July, for the smell of charcoal grills, the distant pop of early firecrackers, and the cold sweetness of watermelon. But there, on the edge of the road, lay a figure. At first, the The boy thought it was a man sleeping off a long night. But as he drew closer, something felt wrong. The stillness wasn't the rhythmic heave of sleep. It was a hollow, heavy vacuum. The boy didn't know why, but a primal chill climbed his spine, defying the 90-degree heat. He turned and ran back to his father. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling. "There's a man. He won't wake up." The father, a man who knew the rhythms of South Park, a place of hard work and harder luck, walked out to the curb. He called out, his voice hesitant. "Hey man, you need some help? Wake up." Silence. The father knelt, then recoiled. It wasn't a man. It was a woman. And she wasn't sleeping. Her eyes were partially open, staring at a sky she would never see again. The red on the pavement wasn't the glow of the morning sun. It was the dark, drying stain of life that had been forcibly extinguished. The father reached for his phone, his fingers slick with sweat. In that moment, the holiday weekend died for the neighborhood. The sirens were already screaming in the distance. Chapter 1. The Veteran and the Rookie. Detective Brian Harris sat at his kitchen table, the steam from his first cup of coffee rising in a slow, languid spiral. After 22 years in the Houston Police Department's Homicide Division, his internal clock was permanently set to the worst-case scenario. Sunday mornings were supposed to be his sanctuary, a time to forget the gray walls of the interview rooms and the smell of industrial cleaner in the morgue. But when his cell phone vibrated against the wood, he didn't even have to look at the screen. He knew the vibration was a summons from the dead. "Harris," he answered, his voice gravelly. "Sergeant, we've got a body," the desk officer said. "Southeast Houston. Jones High School. Patrol is on scene. It looks bad." Harris sighed, the weight of 2 decades of grief settling into his shoulders. "I'm on my way." When he arrived at the scene, the yellow tape was already fluttering in the stagnant breeze. The police cruiser's lights pulsed rhythmically blue, red, blue, red, casting an eerie glow on the brick facade of the high school across the street. Standing near the ditch was Michael Perez. Perez had been in homicide for exactly 3 months. His suit was still sharp, his shoes polished to a mirror finish, but his face was pale. This was his first scene as a lead investigator. He looked like a man standing at the edge of an abyss, wondering if he was strong enough to jump in and bring the truth back out. "Morning, Detective," Harris said, stepping over the tape. "Morning, Sergeant," Perez replied, his voice steadying as he fell into professional mode. "What do we got?" "A woman. Early 30s, maybe late 20s, Perez said, gesturing toward the ditch. "No ID. Multiple gunshot wounds to the head. It's a mess, Brian. A real mess." Harris looked down at the victim. She had been beautiful. Even now, through the trauma and the blood, you could see the grace in her features. She was dressed well, not the attire of someone wandering the streets at night. "Look at the blood, Mike," Harris said, his eyes scanning the asphalt. "See those streaks? That's transfer blood. She wasn't killed here." Perez nodded, taking notes. "So, a vehicle stops. They drag her out. They dump her like she's yesterday's trash." "Exactly," Harris said. He noticed something that didn't fit the typical robbery profile. She's still wearing her jewelry. Gold, by the looks of it. If this was a stick-up, the rings would be gone. This wasn't about money. This was personal. They stood there for a moment, 2 men in a silent dialogue with a body that couldn't speak. Around them, Houston was waking up to celebrate its independence, unaware that, for this woman, the world had ended in a lonely ditch. Chapter 2. Grainy Ghosts. By Monday, the 4th of July, the rest of the city was a riot of noise. The smell of barbecue smoke wafted through the air of every residential block. But inside the Homicide Division, the air was cool, sterile, and filled with the low hum of computer monitors. Harris and Perez had a singular focus: the cameras. "Jones High School," Perez said, clicking through a folder on the server. The security office came through. They have a wide-angle lens pointed right at the drop zone. They huddled around the monitor. The footage was grainy. The black and white colors bled together in the darkness of the 2 a.m. timestamp. "There," Harris pointed. 2 pinpricks of light headlights appeared on the screen. A small vehicle pulled to the side of the road. It was a distinct shape, rounded, almost like a bubble. "A Beetle?" Perez whispered. "Looks like a Volkswagen." On the screen, the passenger door opened. A figure emerged, shadowed and indistinct. There was a struggle, not a fight, but a physical exertion. Something heavy was being dragged. The movement was frantic, clumsy. The figure heaved the weight toward the ditch, then scrambled back into the car. The headlights flared, and the vehicle sped away, leaving nothing but the silence of the night and a body in the grass. "It's a ghost in a machine," Harris said, rubbing his eyes. "But ghosts leave trails. We just need to find the right one." The next stop wasn't a picnic. It was the Harris County Medical Examiner's office. The morgue was the coldest place in Texas. Dr. Miller, the pathologist, looked up from the table as Harris and Perez entered. "Close contact," Miller said, pointing to the wound. "You see this stippling? The charring around the entrance? The barrel was pressed nearly against her skin. It was an execution." "Any ballistics?" Perez asked. "The projectile exited," Miller said. "But we found something else. We ran her prints." He handed a folder to Perez. The rookie's eyes widened as he read the name. "Kumba Sise," Perez read aloud, 31 years old. "Kumba," Harris repeated, the name tasting like silk and tragedy. "Let's find out who loved her, and who hated her enough to brand her skin with gunpowder." Chapter 3. The Notification. The drive to the Sise household was the hardest part of the job. For Harris, it never got easier. For Perez, it was the first time he would have to break a mother's heart. The neighborhood was quiet. As they stepped out of the car, the silence felt heavy. A badge in one hand, a heavy heart in the other. Mrs. Sise opened the door. She was a woman of dignity, her eyes reflecting the resilience of her Sierra Leonean roots. But the moment she saw the two men in suits, the light in her eyes flickered and died. She didn't need them to speak. A mother knows when the world has shifted off its axis. "Kumba?" she whispered. "Mrs. Sise. I'm Detective Perez. This is Sergeant Harris. May we come in?" The next hour was a blur of muffled sobs and the agonizing details of a life cut short. Kumba wasn't just a statistic. She was a daughter of immigrants who had chased the American dream and caught it. She was a model. She was a radio host. She was a voice for the voiceless on her internet show. She was a sweet person, her sister wept. She didn't have a bad bone in her body. She was going to be something. She was already something. Who would want to hurt her? Perez asked gently. Was there anyone? A boyfriend? Someone she was having trouble with? Mrs. Sise looked away. There was a man, David Gabriel. They had a relationship, but it went sour. Over money. He was bitter. Harris made a note. David Gabriel, a bitter ex-boyfriend. It was a classic motive, as old as time itself. But as they left the house, Harris felt a nagging doubt. What about her car, Mrs. Sise? Harris asked. A blue Volkswagen, the mother replied. A Beetle. She loved that car. Harris and Perez exchanged a look. The bubble-shaped car from the video. The pieces were starting to move, but the puzzle was far from complete. Chapter 4. The Burning Bug. Bolo's out on the Beetle, Perez said, his phone pressed to his ear. They were chasing David Gabriel, but the man had an alibi that was as solid as the Houston Ship Channel. Dozens of witnesses placed him at a house party miles away from the crime scene. He was bitter, yes. He was angry about money, yes. But he wasn't a killer, at least not this time. If it's not the ex, who is it? Perez asked, frustration mounting. The answer came in the form of a phone call from arson investigators. We found your bug, the voice on the other end said. Or what's left of it. It's over by Texas Southern University. Someone tried to turn it into a bonfire. They arrived at the scene to find a charred skeleton of a car. The blue paint was bubbled and black, the interior a melted ruin of plastic and foam. Amateur hour, Harris said, looking at the windows. They rolled the windows up before they lit it. Fire needs oxygen, Mike. It choked itself out before it could destroy everything. He pointed to the driver's side door. Amidst the soot and the melted upholstery, there was a dark smear. Blood, Perez whispered. The killers? Or Kumbas, Harris replied. But look at the surveillance from the dorms. The TSU security cameras caught the final act of the car's life. On July 4th, at 2:07 a.m., the Beetle was abandoned. A day later, a figure returned in a different car, a Buick LeSabre, a flash of light, a burst of flame, and two figures running away as the car began to smoke. Two players, Harris said, a killer and an accomplice. The plot thickens. Just then, Perez's phone rang again. A man named Carlton Turney, a concert promoter, had found something in a warehouse where a party had been held the night of the murder. I have an ID card, Turney told them. It belongs to a girl named Kumba Sise, and detectives. There's blood on it. The warehouse was located in the southeast, not far from where the body was dumped. The investigation was narrowing. The net was being cast. They just needed to know whose face was at the other end of the line. To be continued. Shadows in the Bayou City. A true crime novelization. Based on the investigation of Harris and Perez, prologue. The Summer of Silence. July 3rd, 2016. South Park, Houston, Texas. The Houston heat didn't just sit on you, it owned you. By 9:30 inches the morning, the humidity was already a physical weight, thick enough to taste, carrying the scent of parched grass and distant asphalt. In the neighborhood of South Park, the world was slowly waking up to the rhythm of a holiday weekend. Barbecue pits were being cleaned and ice chests were being filled. The 4th of July was a day away, and for most, the air was thick with the promise of fireworks and celebration. For one young boy on his way to a neighbor's house, the holiday spirit died the moment he reached the edge of a ditch near Jones High School. He saw what looked like a man sleeping. It was a common enough sight in certain parts of the city, someone seeking refuge from the sun in the tall, unkempt grass. But as the boy got closer, something felt wrong. The stillness wasn't the stillness of sleep. It was heavy, absolute. Terrified by an instinct he couldn't name, the boy ran home to find his father. "Dad, there's a man. He won't wake up," the boy panted. The father, a man who knew the streets of South Park well enough to be cautious, walked to the spot. He called out, "Hey, you need some help? Wake up." No answer. No movement. Not even the flicker of a fly landing on skin. The father didn't get any closer. He pulled out his phone and dialed 3 numbers that changed the trajectory of the weekend for everyone involved. 911. When the EMTs arrived and turned the sleeping man over, the scene shifted from a welfare check to a nightmare. It wasn't a man. It was a woman, likely in her early 30s. And she hadn't died in her sleep. The 4th of July weekend had begun with a body, and the Bayou City was about to reveal one of its darkest secrets. Chapter 1. The Veteran and the Rookie. Detective Sergeant Brian Harris liked his coffee black and his mornings quiet. After 22 years in the homicide division of the Houston Police Department, he had learned that silence was a luxury. In this business, when the phone rang, it usually meant someone's life had ended in the most violent way possible. He was sipping his first cup on that Sunday morning when his cell phone vibrated across the kitchen table. He didn't need to look at the ID to know the tone. "This is Harris," he said, his voice a low gravel. The report was brief. A body found across from Jones High School in southeast Houston. Patrol had secured the scene. It was fresh. Harris arrived to find the familiar yellow tape fluttering in the hot breeze. Standing by the perimeter was Michael Perez. Perez had been in homicide for only 3 months. He was sharp, eager, and today, he was about to face his baptism by fire. This was to be his first scene as a lead investigator. "Morning, Detective," Perez said, his face tight. He was trying to maintain a professional mask, but the smell of the scene was already beginning to challenge his composure. "Morning, Mike," Harris replied, looking him over. Harris had volunteered to partner with the rookie until a permanent spot opened up. He liked the kid's energy. "So, what do we got?" "Female. Late 20s, maybe early 30s, Perez reported, glancing at his notebook. "No ID. Multiple gunshot wounds to the head. It's a mess, Sergeant. Hard to tell the exact count with the blood and the hair." Harris stepped under the tape. He didn't just look, he observed. He saw the world in transfer blood and drag marks. He noticed the way the grass was matted down. "Look at this, Mike!" Harris pointed to the edge of the road. "Transfer blood. A vehicle stopped here. They didn't kill her here. They killed her somewhere else, drove her to this spot, and dragged her out of the passenger side like she was yesterday's trash. It was a dumping ground. A cold, calculated disposal. Check her for jewelry," Harris said. Perez leaned in. "She's still wearing it. A necklace, rings. If it was a robbery, they would have stripped her." "Exactly," Harris grunted. "This wasn't about money. This was personal. Or it was a message. Let's see if the school cameras were watching." He looked up at Jones High School across the street. In the age of the surveillance state, even the dead had witnesses, they just happened to be digital. Chapter 2. The Girl with the Radio Voice. While Harris and Perez were scouring the dirt for shell sprays and tire tracks, the world of Kumba Sise was beginning to unravel for her family. Kumba wasn't just another statistic, she was a force of nature. Born to immigrants from Sierra Leone, she carried the hopes of 2 continents on her shoulders. She was a model, a mover, a shaker. But more than that, she was the voice. On her internet radio show, she was the queen of the airwaves. She interviewed hip-hop artists, debated social issues, and radiated an energy that made people believe in the Houston dream. She was 31, beautiful, and ambitious. But as the sun climbed higher on July 5th, the silence from Kumba's phone became deafening. At the homicide division, the hit came back from the lab. In Texas, fingerprints are taken for driver's licenses. The digital loops and whorls of the victim matched a name, Kumba Cisse. For Michael Perez, the next task was the one they never taught you how to do in the academy, the death notification. He drove to the Cisse home in a suit that felt too tight. He held his badge in his hand before he even reached the door. He didn't want there to be any ambiguity. When the door opened, he saw the face of Mrs. Cisse. He didn't have to say a word. The moment she saw the detective's eyes, the mother knew. The daughter who had visited on Saturday morning, talking about a party, was never coming home. Mrs. Cisse? Perez began, his voice softening. The house filled with a sound that Perez would hear in his dreams for years, the sound of a mother's heart breaking. Kumba's sister, a woman who shared Kumba's fire, stood by. She didn't have a bad bone in her body, she whispered through tears. She was on her way to being something great. Who would do this? Perez took notes, but his mind was already racing. He asked the standard questions. Who was she seeing? Any trouble? There was a boyfriend, the family mentioned. David Gabriel. Things went south over money. He was bitter. Perez wrote the name down. David Gabriel. Motive, money, revenge. It was a lead. But in the back of his mind, Harris's voice echoed. This felt personal. Chapter 3. The Blue Beetle and the Fire. The investigation caught its first break from a grainy piece of surveillance footage from Jones High School. Harris and Perez sat in a dark room, eyes fixed on the monitor. At 2:07 a.m. on the morning of July 4th, a small, dark, bubble-shaped car pulled up to the ditch. The headlights cut through the Houston humidity. A figure moved to the passenger side. Something heavy was dragged into the darkness. Then, the car sped away. Is that a Beetle? Perez asked, squinting. Looks like a Volkswagen Bug, Harris agreed. And the family said Kumba drove a blue one. Where's the car, Mike? The answer came on July 6th, not from a witness, but from an arson investigator. Across the street from a Texas Southern University, TSU, dormitory, a blue Volkswagen Beetle had been turned into a charred skeleton. The windows had been rolled up, a gallon of gasoline tossed inside, and a match struck. Panic, Harris said, walking around the blackened husk of the car at the vehicle examination building. The killer realized the car was a rolling crime scene. They tried to burn the evidence, but they weren't very bright, Perez noted. Fire needs oxygen. With the windows up, it choked itself out before it could destroy everything. Look, he pointed to the interior of the driver's door. Amidst the soot, there was a smear, blood. The detectives went back to the TSU security office. They pulled more tape. At 2:07 a.m. on July 4th, the Beetle was abandoned. But the cameras caught something even better. On July 5th, a figure returned to the car. They weren't alone. A second car, a white Buick LeSabre, pulled up next to it. The figure from the Buick ran to the Beetle. Flash, a burst of orange flame. The figure ran back to the Buick, and both cars vanished into the night. 2 players, Harris whispered. A killer and an accomplice. The plot thickens. Chapter 4. The Mask of the Sociopath. The search for David Gabriel, the ex-boyfriend, ended quickly. He had an alibi, dozens of witnesses at a house party. He was a dead end, but the investigation into Kumba's professional life opened a new door. They visited the internet radio station and met Don Hilliard, the manager. Kumba was the real deal, Hilliard said, his eyes downcast. She had that national potential, but she had a shadow, a guy named Leroy. Leroy Stutz. The name sent a chill through the room. Stutz was Kumba's current boyfriend and occasional co-host, but according to Hilliard, Leroy wasn't interested in Kumba's success. He was jealous of it. He went on a rant on air once, Hilliard recalled, degrading women, calling them names. I had to let him go. He was a loose cannon. Harris went back to the office and ran Leroy Stutz through the system. When the printer stopped, the detectives stared at the rap sheet in silence. In 1992, Leroy Stutz had committed murder. He had been sentenced to 45 years and served 18 before being paroled. "A murderer," Perez said, his voice cold. "Kumba was dating a convicted killer, and she probably didn't even know it," Harris added. "Look at the lies these guys tell. They don't admit to murder. They say they took a fall for a friend or it was a robbery gone wrong. But Kumba was smart. What if she found out the truth?" The detectives began to piece together a new motive. Not money, not a car, identity. If Kumba found out who Leroy really was, a killer and, as rumors suggested, someone with a hidden life in prison, she became a threat to his carefully constructed mask. And for a sociopath, a threat to the mask is a death sentence. Chapter 5. The Boots and the Blood. The break the detectives needed didn't come from a lab. It came from a panicked man named Daryl. Daryl was Leroy's cousin. On the night of July 2nd, Leroy had shown up at a house in southeast Houston, breathless and bleeding. He had scratches on his face, Daryl told the police in a secret meeting. He was panicked, needed a change of clothes. He left his boots behind. Harris and Perez didn't waste a second. They recovered the boots, a pair of brown polo boots. Under the magnifying glass, the stitching was stained with a dark, dried substance. Positive for blood, the tech reported an hour later. The DNA match was the final nail. The blood on the boots belonged to Kumba Sisse. The DNA in the beetle belonged to Leroy Stutz. The detectives now had their man. But they also had the Buick LeSabre from the TSU footage. A registration check revealed the owner, Latrice Stutz, Leroy's daughter. Harris, the expert interrogator, sat across from Latrice in the small, windowless room. He let Perez take the lead, watching from the shadows like a hawk. Latrice was hostile. "I don't know nothing about my dad's business," she snapped. "We have you on video, Latrice," Perez said calmly. "At TSU. At the Beetle. Your dad asked you for a ride, didn't he? He told you he needed to take care of something?" Slowly, the wall crumbled. Latrice admitted to driving her father to the TSU campus. She claimed she didn't see him light the fire, but she placed him at the scene of the arson. The net was closing. Chapter 6. The Takedown. July 12, 2016. Leroy Stutz thought he was a genius. He thought he had outsmarted the homicide division. He was hiding out, moving between shadows, waiting for the heat to die down. He didn't see the unmarked units circling his mother's car. When Leroy stepped out at a commercial business in southeast Houston, he found himself staring into the barrels of a dozen service weapons. "Show me your hands, down on the ground!" Leroy Stutz, the man who had already spent 18 years behind bars for taking a life, was back in handcuffs. He didn't look like a monster, he looked like a tired, middle-aged man. But Harris knew better. He had seen this kind of empty before. In the interrogation room, Harris didn't play games. He laid out the evidence like a royal flush on a poker table. "We have the boots, Leroy. Your cousin gave them to us. We have the blood. We have your daughter. We have the video." Leroy sat there, his face a mask of indifference. "I didn't do nothing. I don't know what you're talking about." "You killed her because she found out who you were," Harris said, leaning in so close Leroy could smell the black coffee on his breath. "She was going places, and you were just a ghost from a prison cell. She wanted out, and you couldn't handle being forgotten." Leroy didn't confess. Sociopaths rarely do. They believe that if they don't admit it, it didn't happen. But the jury felt differently. Epilogue. The echo of a voice. The trial was a grim recap of a life cut short. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman who was breaking free. Kumba had discovered Leroy's true past the murder, the prison rumors, and she had tried to end it. On that night in the warehouse parking lot, the argument had turned physical. Leroy had grabbed her, scratched his face in the struggle, and then pulled the trigger. One shot to the head. A cold, efficient execution. He had dragged her body like garbage and burned her car like trash. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty. Leroy Stutz was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. He would die in the same system he had spent his youth in. A monster returned to his cage. For Brian Harris and Michael Perez, the case was closed. But for the Sisse family, the hole in their lives remained. Kumba's voice was gone from the airwaves. The voice was silent. But in the quiet moments of a Houston evening, When the fireworks of the 4th of July fade into smoke, those who knew her still hear the echo of her laughter, a reminder of a dream that a monster could never truly kill. The End. Shadows in the Bayou City. A true crime novelization. Based on the investigation of Harris and Perez. Prologue. The Summer of Silence. July 3rd, 2016. South Park, Houston, Texas. The Houston heat didn't just sit on you, it owned you. By 9:30 inches the morning, the humidity was already a physical weight, thick enough to taste, carrying the scent of parched grass and distant asphalt. In the neighborhood of South Park, the world was slowly waking up to the rhythm of a holiday weekend. Cicadas screamed in the trees, a high-pitched electric drone that seemed to vibrate with the rising temperature. Barbecue pits were being dragged onto lawns, and ice chests were being filled with cheap beer and soda. The 4th of July was a day away, and for most, the air was thick with the promise of fireworks, family, and celebration. For a 10-year-old boy walking down the street to a friend's house, the world was still a place of simple wonders and summer freedom, but that innocence died the moment he reached the edge of a deep, overgrown ditch near Jones High School. He saw what looked like a man sleeping. It was a common enough sight in certain parts of the city, someone seeking refuge from the relentless sun in the tall, unkempt grass. But as the boy stood there, squinting against the glare, a cold shiver bypassed the morning heat. The stillness wasn't the rhythmic stillness of sleep. It was heavy, absolute. There was no rise and fall of a chest, no swatting at the flies that were already beginning to congregate. Terrified by an instinct he couldn't yet name, the boy ran home, his sneakers slapping against the hot pavement. "Dad, there's a man. He won't wake up," the boy panted, his face pale beneath the summer tan. The father, a man who had lived in South Park long enough to know that silence in a ditch usually meant trouble, walked back with his son. He kept a cautious distance, his eyes scanning the form huddled in the weeds. He called out, his voice cracking the morning quiet. "Hey, you need some help? Wake up, man." No answer. No movement. The world seemed to hold its breath. The father didn't get any closer. He pulled out his phone and dialed 3 numbers that changed the trajectory of the weekend for everyone involved. 911. When the EMTs arrived and turned the body over, the scene shifted from a welfare check to a nightmare in a heartbeat. It wasn't a man. It was a woman, likely in her early 30s, dressed in clothes that suggested she had been out for a night of fun. She hadn't died in her sleep. The dark, matted exit wound at the back of her skull told a much different story. The 4th of July weekend had begun with a body, and the Bayou City was about to reveal one of its darkest secrets. Chapter 1. The Veteran and the Rookie. Detective Sergeant Brian Harris liked his coffee black and his mornings quiet. After 22 years in the homicide division of the Houston Police Department, he had learned that silence was a luxury, a fleeting interval between the echoes of gunfire. He had seen the city change, seen the ways people found to kill each other evolve, but the core of the job remained the same, finding the truth in the wreckage of a life. He was sipping his first cup on that Sunday morning, watching the sunlight hit the oak trees in his yard, when his cell phone vibrated across the kitchen table. The sound was like an angry insect. He didn't need to look at the caller ID. In homicide, the phone only rang at this hour if someone was dead. "This is Harris," he said, his voice a low, disciplined gravel. The report was brief. A body found across from Jones High School in southeast Houston. Patrol had already taped off the perimeter. It was a fresh scene. Harris arrived 20 minutes later. The blue and red lights of the squad cars were muted by the brilliant Texas sun. Standing by the yellow tape was Michael Perez. Perez had been in homicide for only 3 months. He was sharp, his suits were always pressed, and his eyes were full of an eagerness that Harris remembered having 2 decades ago. Today, Perez was the lead investigator. It was his scene, his responsibility, his baptism by fire. "Morning, Detective," Perez said. He was trying to maintain a professional mask, but Harris could see the slight tension in his jaw. The smell of a fresh scene, iron, sweat, and the beginning of decay was something no one ever truly got used to. "Morning, Mike," Harris replied, stepping out of his car and adjusting his blazer. He had volunteered to partner with the rookie until a permanent slot opened up. He liked the kid's instincts. "So, what do we got?" "Female. Late 20s, maybe early 30s, Perez reported, glancing at his notebook. "No ID, no purse, multiple gunshot wounds to the head. It's a mess, Sergeant. Hard to tell the exact count with the blood and the hair until the ME gets a look." Harris stepped under the tape. He didn't just look, he observed. He moved with a slow, predatory grace, his eyes scanning the ground for things most people missed. He saw the world in transfer blood and drag marks. "Look at the grass here, Mike," Harris pointed to the edge of the road. The blades were flattened, stained with a dark, tacky residue. Transfer blood. A vehicle stopped right here. They didn't kill her in this ditch. They killed her somewhere else, drove her here under the cover of night, and dragged her out of the passenger side. They dumped her like she was yesterday's trash. "Cold," Perez whispered. "Calculated," Harris corrected. "Check her hands. Check for jewelry." Perez leaned in, careful not to disturb the evidence. "She's still wearing a necklace. Gold. And a ring. If this was a robbery, Sergeant, they would have stripped her clean." "Exactly," Harris grunted, straightening up. "This wasn't about a few bucks or a carjacking gone wrong. This was